another day with our startup bootcamp. Thank you, Nanda, for joining in. And today's guest speaker, Mr. Nanda Kumar, is going to talk to us on the ideal customer profile. A brief introduction. He finished his Bachelor's of Engineering from Ambedkar Institute of Technology and a PG certification in Digital Marketing and Communications from MICA. He's been Director Growth at Foxbound and also with Upgrad as Manager of Career Services and Corporate Relations. I think IIITB is not new to you. Upgrad and IIITB go a long way back. Also, he was with the Product Folds, building the product community and building the growth community with the growth folks. And also now is actively looking after startup partnerships at Freshworks. He is part of the product ecosystem and building vibrant communities in product and growth. And here at Freshworks, as part of the initiative, startup can avail up to $10,000 of credits across Freshworks products and join the Freshworks global community of 400 plus venture capitalists, accelerators, and incubators and the startup community from 87 countries. Well, thank you, Mr. Nanda, for accepting to talk to our folks. And I'm sure we have a startup pitch competition at the end of this, and definitely we could. So all of them who are really attentive and make it to the finals could expect something from Freshworks. On that note, thank you, Mr. Nanda, and over to you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Karthik. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Really glad to be present here and interesting to see a lot of folks interested towards learning more about startups and also around the marketing space. So glad to be here and welcome to all the participants who are part of this session. So I'm just, before I get started with the session, just curious to see a bit more about the audience and just to double check, how much time do I have for the session?
As a keynote, you will have about 40 minutes, Nanda, and then opening it up for Q&A for 20 minutes. You can play around with this time. So we have ideally 1 hour.
Got it. Sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, so before Nanda starts, I'd also place on record and acknowledge our presence of our CEO, Mr. Y.S. Narayan. Thank you for joining in.
Hey, Karthik, thank you. Hey, Nanda, glad to have you on board. Looking forward to listening to you. I mean, because I'm kind of partially your counterpart, been in advertising, marketing, and communications for the last 35 years. So obviously what we're going to talk about will probably be very, very interesting to me from the perspective of a fellow professional. So looking forward to your session.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Narayan, for the welcome. All right, happy to get started. Let me know when you have my screen.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay, great. Yeah, so today I think we're going to look at mostly more about how to build an ideal customer profile. But before we get into this, I have outlined the overall presentation in a way where we will also be understanding not just about getting straight on to building the ideal customer profile, but we will also get to the depth to understand why do we need an ideal customer profile and how it helps in the long run for marketing and different communication strategies that we will plan for any startup or product. So before we get started, I think thanks a lot, Karthik, for the warm intro. Yeah, you already covered pretty much most of it. Yeah, quick just to touch upon, I have spent more than like 8 years in this product growth and customer success space. Worked with both B2B and B2C companies. At present, apart from Freshworks, I'm also building 2 communities called the Product Folks and Growth Folks. And Freshworks, I drive startup partnerships and engagement, where we work with investors, accelerators, and incubators, and also corporate partners across the world to enable, to help startups in their journey by facilitating with free credits and also support through access to engagement, mentorship, and a whole lot of other offerings that the startups might need early on in their journey. Yeah, before we get on, I'd like to keep this a little more interactive. So I've just listed down from my experience of understanding about ideal customer profile, why do we need an ideal customer profile, both from marketing, branding perspective? But I'm just curious to see from the audience here, maybe like feel free to add it in the chat section. Apart from this, do you feel, are there any other aspects on how a startup or any person who's in the marketing or sales space can actually leverage the ideal customer profile? So yeah, feel free to maybe unmute or also share it in the chat section. Just curious to see what do you think about ideal customer profile. In case if you feel like there is something that we need to add on top of this, happy to see what's in store from your side as well. Anyone else? Anyone in the chat? Or okay. Okay, to save more money on marketing, ideal customer profile will appreciate our products or services. Thank you, Sugumaran and Pranav. Yeah, it's an overarching, actually a value add to some of the principles that I've also listed here. Yeah, I'll get straight into the concept. So now, when we look at some of the brands that are present here, right? I just want you to take a minute, take a step back, and associate with some of the brands that are listed here, and just imagine yourself, or just go back and resonate with brands. Like, how do you feel when you just look at some of the logos or some of the brands that are present here? I'm assuming most of us are familiar with Mac, Amazon, McDonald's, Coca-Cola. Just think for a moment, and whenever you go for a restaurant or you go make those purchase decisions, just think for a moment what makes you to take the decision between choosing between Apple versus Windows or McDonald's versus Burger King. Is it price? Is it the taste, or is it the brand reconnect that you have already established? And what exactly do you resonate with some of these brands? Just think for a moment. Yeah, specs. Okay, affinity towards the brand. Okay, that's for the previous slide. I just want you to like go back and also analyze. Just think through. Do you make these decisions? Is it because of the rational or logical thought process, or do you make this decision because of the emotional connect that you have with the brand, right? So most cases, I think when it comes to brand, in fact, uh, whenever you like say step out and make those decisions, emotions precedes the logical thought process, and that's one of the reason why we might have handpicked. Let's say if you have had it, maybe when you're purchasing something on Amazon, you might have picked some brand, but because there is some discount added to the brand, like say if you're purchasing an MI phone or a OnePlus phone, but I'm sure some of you can resonate because it is iPhone, like you ignore all those logical components and you associate with the, yeah, like Anshul mentioned on the chat, like you associate with the reputation that the brand have, because that's what matters the most to you. Yeah. So emotions precedes all the logical thought process. So all the decisions that we make, whether it is through sales or whether it is through marketing, it all is led by emotions. So yeah, I think Neelab has also mentioned, yeah, emotional greater than the rational thoughts. Yeah, that's true. So let's think for a moment and understand a few other brands that all of us are familiar with, OnePlus and Nike. So this is a brand identity prism I've presented here. So we'll get into the details of what exactly is a brand identity prism. Why do we need it? But if you look at some of the components that is listed here, when it comes to brand identity, these brands have established themselves to resonate with some of the audience that they are already in touch with, some of the customers that they resonate with. And as a customer, as an audience that is looking at these brands, they perceive them through specific factors and instances that makes it easier for them to say that, you know what, this is something that is resonating for my personality, for my identity, and it goes along for the kind of decisions that I made and for the kind of characteristics that I represent, right? So we'll get to the details of how do we come to this at a later stage. But I just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, now let's get into the journey of determining, like how do we determine, we need a specific characteristic, we need a specific personality for a brand, we need a specific theme, tonality. How do we do that, right? So the first and foremost step in this is to identify how do you position in the overall ecosystem, like the overall market space. And secondly, to also think through across all the other products that is already live in the market, where do I stand, right? So there is this concept called perceptual mapping. So in this, there are different types of perceptual mapping. So let's say the first example, it is price versus quality, where you could compare, again, a typical use case would be Apple to MI and OnePlus brands, right? So where you steer towards high price, high quality versus lower price, high quality, like OnePlus or MI could fit into this brand C category. Lower quality, lower price, like other models will come into this category. And the second, you can see this is more towards food category, which is the food choices that you make, whether it is more nutritious or whether it is of more taste, less taste, right? And there are different ways in which you can actually look at this perceptual mapping depending on the category of products that you have. So the right side, again, there are different other brands like natural brands, fragrant brands. So this is how first we determine where do we stand with respect to the other products that are already live in the market, so that we can differentiate among themselves, right? So yeah, so the first and foremost step is to identify whether the product that we have, should we stand to be like in an undifferentiated market? Are we standing in an undifferentiated market, or is it a marketing strategy that we need to have, or should we have a differential strategy for the type of product that we're going to release? And the third is, are we looking at a concentrated niche market within the market that we have that we have already identified, right? So now I think I've also listed down a couple of examples of some of the brands that we associate on a day-to-day basis. So here we can see a perceptual map of satisfaction level versus the preferred brand. So, I mean, this might make sense for some of you, might not make sense for some of you, but this is based on the survey that has been done on how customer choices are dependent based on the preferred brand versus the satisfaction that they get out of each of the choices that they made in this lifestyle category. The second is, again, I'm sure like you know some of these brands like Zara, Forever 21, right? This is a quite different strategy. This is a price versus quarter comparison. So I'm sure like you can also resonate like why Zara fits into the high price and horticulture principle. Now, I think again another example of a car brand. So this is again of reputation. Like one of you mentioned the reputation. Yeah, this is a perceptual map of like prestigious versus financial effectiveness that someone could categorize, and this is how we the brands like handpick whenever they are entering into whenever they're releasing a new product. How do they focus on their market, right? And this is a broad level perceptual mapping where it is to represent how as a brand, like how as BMW I stand in the market, right? But it could be different again for the individual products or individual cars that they might bring in. And these cars might fit in some of the other categories, but overall as a brand, this is how the customers perceive them in the market. Okay. Now, before we also step onto ideal customer profile, I also wanted to step into these details of the ideal. There is a process that we follow in marketing to arrive at this. It's called the STP model. So first it is segmentation, and the second it's targeting and positioning. So how does this help? And when we look at ideal customer profile, I'm maybe like I'll just also see some of you on the chat to see like if why do you think we need an ideal customer profile? Like, maybe anyone can share it in the chat, like just open to see what are your thoughts on what do you hear, like why do you need an ideal customer profile and how does this help in the long run? And why can't we just like, we know what is the brand or a product. Why can't we just go ahead and run a marketing campaign and start selling the product? Why do we need a ideal customer profile? So anyone on chat or anyone on mic, happy to hear your thoughts. Make emotional connect. Yeah. Okay. Attract target market, product market fit, identify target customers. Yeah, we can focus on those customers to gauge broadly who would be possible customers. Okay. To customize marketing based on what would connect more with personas. Right. Yeah. Pretty much covers most of the important aspects. But I'd like to think for a moment, like especially when you work with some of the large brands, right? Let's say Coca-Cola or ITC, where they have not just one product, they have a whole lot of category that they've established within the offerings they have, and they have probably like tens of hundreds of product categories, and they need to differentiate themselves among the other competitors, other products that they have within themselves, so that they don't compete or they don't go ahead and collide with the existing products, right? And it also makes it easier as a customer, as a user, when we look at specific, say when you're looking at a product, maybe you're looking at it either through billboards, through like online channels like Amazon, or you go ahead and visit a store, you're looking the product, right? You need that emotional connect with the products. So how do you bring those emotional connect with some of the products, right? And that's where, to make these choices easier for the customer and for the users, it is essential that you start looking at building this STP models. That is essential before even you probably releasing the product, or before even you start like looking at launching a product, whether it is physical product or a digital product, right? So let's get into each of these components. Now, first it's segmentation. So what happens in the first, with the segmentation, you are ideally when we look at a specific market, you look the market as a broad, right? And you say that, okay, in fact, from my own experience, when I was part of Upgrade or when I was part of Foxbound, like even before getting into the details, when I just think about a product, like, okay, I have a course, Upgrade course, that I need to market it to the relevant audience, and it is for working professionals. And the moment I think about working professionals, I tend to lose my focus that, okay, it's for all working professionals, right? But I tend to miss out on the targeting if I don't double down on finalizing the segmentation. Similarly with Foxpond. So Foxpond, it's a product for sales automation. We used to sell it to the sales reps, sales leaders, sales teams. But again, okay, fine. I'm looking at selling it or marketing it to the sales specific target, but is that the company that I need to work with, right? Is that the company that I need to associate with for the long-term benefits that I'm looking at from the product? So I have a lot of experience by working with these companies. I'm happy to share maybe like towards the end of it. But what essentially segmentation means is you break the entire market into smaller granular levels, and you categorize them based on geography, demographics, characteristics, personality, so that you know who exactly is the target market that you're targeting to, and you know how you can resonate well with that specific customer or a user, where your messaging stands out to that specific target market. Otherwise, you are lost in the noise. The customers will not be able to resonate what you have in store, and you will be like one among almost tons of other products that are out there in the market. So it's important that you get to the segmentation right. So you know you're addressing the pain points accurately, you're addressing the solutions accurately to these users, which is essential. Otherwise, you're just selling your product or a feature which will not help the user. Because if you're just telling that, hey, I have this wonderful product, this product has XYZ things, you can do blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, whether user or a customer is able to solve with that product that you have? Are you addressing that accurately, where he understands that my pain point is being actually solved with this product, right? That's the granularity you have to get into. We'll get into the targeting and positioning again in detail, but I wanted to focus on segmentation, because that's the primary, that's one of the important aspects of building an ideal customer profile. So yeah, step one, we identify basis the market, like what are the segments that we need to target. Second, that's where we build the profile of resulting segments. So this is where building an ideal customer profile comes into picture. I just wanted to not just limit to talking about ICP, but want you to understand the overall journey of building an ideal customer profile. How does it evolve? How does it help you not just in building it, but at the same time, why do you need it, and how it will help you on the long run after you build this, right? So yeah, the second thing within STP is targeting, where how do you target the customers accurately once you identify the segments, and how do you build, how do you attract the customers or users with the messaging that you can actually come up, because now you know that you have your you have your segmentation right. And the third thing is positioning. It's important that you also differentiate by right positioning. Again, otherwise you will lose within the noise that is created by all other products in the market. So let's think for a moment. I think I've just listed down some of the brands that we are all associated with. There are a couple of brands probably that is outdated, like Micromax or Motorola. To some extent, I mean, they are live, but I think one of you also pointed reputation is one of the important category. So if you look at these smartphone brands, right, like how iPhone resonates and how do they choose their ICP or ideal customer profile. I mean, they are very clear that it is a category that we have established to it's a high-tech product, and it is also for the high-income groups that we have released, right? And Motorola, again, it is for affordable class of people with a decent, who can afford a decent price, but it is a stylish phones, right? And Micromax, when they launched, okay, it's an high-end feature, which is probably like to a little middle or lower class, working class, so that the adoption is higher for these set of categories. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware about the way MI has got into the Indian market and how they've scaled. So if you look at, probably from my standpoint, at least after Apple OnePlus, MI is actually leading in the market, apart from Oppo and Vivo, in leading some of the categories within the iPhone segment, right? So now, okay, let's I just again listed on iPhone. I think now that we have understood some aspects of the brand identity prism and why do we need this, so let's get into the probably a bit more details of how OnePlus represents itself as a brand to the users, right? Again, so when you look at the brand, one, you look at the brand from the internal resonance point of view, which is you have your internal characteristics which is unique to you, and you showcase certain characteristics and personalities, right? And whenever we see the communication or the products, it's an emotional connect that you establish with these brands to see whether it is resonating with me and my style and my tonality and personality. And second, it's about the representation that it can bring it to yourself when you're using the product or when you're actually leveraging the product for your own use, right? And it has different factors, like what is the relationship that you establish, what is the reflection, like whenever you hold OnePlus, like you represent yourself as a tech geek, or you focus on different customizations that OnePlus is able to bring in, whereas iPhone, it's a different representation or reflection altogether, right? So it is to get to this granular identity, we need this STP framework. But yeah, I'll take a pause for a moment, and I'll also have you go through the reflection process. Just think through for a moment, how does it help? Why do we need a brand identity prism? And why do we need the overall STP model, right? I think some of you have already answered. Most of it is in the chat. It is surrounded to whatever we have discussed. But yeah, like maybe add it in the chat, like apart from what I've listed down here, we'll get into the details of it again, but just want you to think through, okay, reflect through, how does it help? Like, why will it help? How will it help a marketer or a sales guy within a team, like when the brand is growing? Like, yeah, probably like share it on the chat. Happy to hear what's your view on this. Externalization and internalization. Sure, Pranav. Yeah, I'll take it in the Q&A section. Definitely, I'll take all the questions in the Q&A section. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other like thoughts on how does it help as a marketer? Like as a marketer, like why do you see it will help you? Cool. Yeah, let me know if you have it. Otherwise, I'll get into the next section. It helps on what to market. Yeah, okay. To whom? Yeah, sure. Sure. Okay. I'll get into the depth to some extent. So basically, I've listed down different reasons why ICP will help. Primarily to stand out in the market through brand awareness, through brand recall, so that you can go back to the brand again and again, and some amount of brand equity that you can create through these components, so that you know that when someone is thinking about your brand or a product, there is some equity that is already in store, right? And also, like, because you are doubling down on understanding your users to a level where you know their behavior, you know their pain points. Whenever you're communicating it, it is not just helping for the users, but at the same time for the other stakeholders and investors, that to represent where you stand in the market, so that if you go read the press releases whenever someone launches a smartphone or a new category within the food, like you can see that they specifically mention that it is launched for XYZ category to target these set of users, right? And it is for this reason, like it makes it super easy for other stakeholders to also like understand where the brand stands and resonate with them, to create the overall differentiation strategy. Now, yeah, I've just given an example of, again, how Coca-Cola is positioning or differentiating in the market, and how does it resonate the personality of a specific user, like what is the brand slogan, and the points of parity. Like it's like, okay, when you think about Coke, it's like a refreshing flavor, right? So these are some of the components that the brand have thought through to clearly distinguish among like Pepsi or other beverages in the market. Yeah. Now, coming to brand elements, I think we have looked at when we think about a specific brand, like how do we perceive it? But now, because we have understood more about the brand and more about the components, STP, and we know what is our user, what is our target is. Now it makes it easier for, as a brand, for me to actually decide the logo, decide the color theme, decide like who else does it resonate with, so that you can choose the brand ambassadors, or you can choose the relevant influencers for marketing your brand. And at the same time, like it just evolves from the point where you're thinking about the product to actually launching it to market, even to packaging and marketing, and like the overall experience and the feel that you give to the product, right? Okay, there's something in the chat. Okay, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And finally, coming to deciding your brand guidelines. So almost all the large companies, I mean, even like for that sake, like even B2B brand that is looking at launching a product or like communicating with the customers, they have these brand guidelines. And the reason why it's important is because now that you know who's your target market is, who's your segmented market is, now it's easier for you to resonate with these users, that hey, this is what they resonate with, and I stand for XYZ characteristics, and it makes it super easy for you to determine your brand colors and logo and how do you position. And again, this is important because when as a marketer, they are looking at creating marketing campaign or probably working with the resellers. Now it's super easy, right? Like, that, hey, this is how I stand, and this is how I need my brand components to reflect, so that I am differentiable and I am positioning it right in the market. Okay, so again, there are different other factors. I don't want to get into the details of the brand elements and why it is required. We've already gone through that. Probably we will touch upon this in case we have some time. But yeah, here's another example. Like there are a few brands that I've listed here. Just want you to think through for a moment and see, like, what do you, it's mentioned that when you think about like Mercedes, like you see that, okay, it's a ruler. Like when you think about probably Adidas, it's called as Hero. Like just reflect to see, like, does it resonate with the same characteristic with you also? Because I think at least for the type of communications that have been rolling out so far, I feel like it does stand out for that specific resonance that they have been able to establish in the market. Right now, there is again a concept called brand personality, which is it's an in-depth it's basically to delve into the details of, like, again, how do you establish through communication, through representation, and through the experience that you give within the brand. Again, I'm not getting into the details of this, but yeah, I've just given some examples of, okay, what are some of the brands that's sincere, that's exciting, that's competing, and sophisticated. I think now probably you might get some sense of, like, what brand personality and why is it required. Now I think let's get on to the actual topic. So I think I've already crossed a lot of time in looking at different components, but I actually, when I thought about putting this presentation together, I really thought through, like, why do we, before even we getting started with ideal customer profile, I really wanted you all to go through the journey of understanding what is an ICP is and why it is required. Because now it makes easier for you to understand, like, why do I look at specific components within the ICP, right? So whenever you're building an ICP, it's important that rather than you taking a market as a whole, in fact, get into the details of not just at a segment level, but get into the details of even looking at that specific person within the segment, and understand this person, like, what are their needs, what are their pain points, what does success mean to them, and what are some of their common fears and challenges, objections, and failures that they go through on a day-to-day basis, like, so that you can actually understand the target market really well. So I have again listed on a couple of examples, but to probably evolve on building that ideal customer profile, these are some of the steps that you might have to follow, where first and foremost, you select your top target customer that you see that, okay, this is what my exact customer should look like, and then get into the details of, like, what does it make for you to create a long lasting impact with this customer, right? And what will it resonate with the customer to create that brand recall and brand equity and create that long lasting memorable impact with this customer, right? And start getting into the details of understanding more about the customer, like, what are the characteristics the customer share that resonates with this brand, and is it for a specific sector, like, should he come from a specific designation, from a specific age, gender, demographics, psychographics, characteristics. So we get into all these details to understand what exactly they stand for. Okay, let me get into the chat. Okay. Now I'll probably, it's an in-depth exercise that we do basically to arrive at an understanding of what an ideal customer profile is. But let me share you a couple of examples of building an ideal customer profile. So I've listed down some of the top factors that ideally we see. The top factors, like, We look at demographics, their needs, their pain points, solutions, behavioral characteristics. So here, I'm going to take you through another slide where we have different personas for within the product that we were catering to. So this is a ICP that we have built for my existing company that we have worked with. So as you can see, I think, yeah, I hope you can see the screen screen now. So you can see the product that we were serving was for a B2B sales automation use case. But this product, we were sure that it is going to be used by sales reps, sales leaders, and also the sales agents who are basically reaching out to their customer, their target markets, right? But at the same time, for some of the companies, like we also interact with marketers because these products are not just decided by just the sales team alone. It is also, there should also be buy-in from the marketing team. So we have listed down, okay, if you take a marketing person as an example, this is a person called Mia, and what is the overview of her profile looking like? You know, what are her goals? What does she do on a day-to-day basis? And as a marketer, what is her pain points, right? And so we've listed down, okay, sales and marketing, there is always misalignments, and there is always challenges like what does it cost when a salesperson is not driving leads for a marketer, right? And what is the solution that they are expecting as a marketer from the sales team, right? So we've listed these details, and at the same time we've listed what are her top priorities, because the top priorities for a marketer is different from sales team. Like probably for marketer, it's to generate more leads, marketing qualified leads, but for salesperson, it is to close and qualify more MQLs to SQLs, right? So it's different. There's always a battle that a marketing team is not giving me relevant leads to sales team. And so we understand these challenges so that it'll help us to reach out to them, telling them that, hey, this is how Foxbound or a product will help you solve this XYZ challenge. So why don't we get together to understand, like, you know, how we help other sales and marketing teams to solve this. Again, we've also listed down, so within the sales process, this is a B2B use case. What I'm presenting right now is a completely B2B use case. So we have, although our product was used by the entire sales team, but there are different decision makers, there are different types of people that we interact with for the purchase decisions to happen. So you have an actual user, we call end users. You have a champion who might not be the end user, but he might be the champion to actually influence the sales decisions. And third, you have the actual decision maker who's like head of sales or CXO, who would not get hands-on with the product, but rather they are the ones who's going to make decisions, right? So when you talk to each of these different categories of people, your communication to them will be completely different, because I mean, you get on a call with sales leader and you start sharing your product. Hey, this is my product and this is what it does, right? And my product resonates with, you know, like you start adding leads and you start sharing the demo, and they'll be lost. They're like, it's not my priority. Like getting into the details of product is not priority. I need to achieve XYZ quota for this specific quarter. Can you be able to do that, right? That's their pain points, and that is what they need to hear. So it's important that you understand what are their top priority, and then start listing down their pain points and solutions. Because when you reach out to them through email or through advertisements, through ads, or any medium, you know that, you know, you're addressing the right solution that they need and which resonates with them. And that's why it's important that you understand. Like, say for example, in this case, as a head of sales, my priority is to bring in the revenue. I don't care what product I'm using, what other challenges that the team ultimately is being looked upon for the kind of revenue is able to bring in, and whether it is there an ROI for the kind of investment that I make on this specific product, right? So again, there is a sales director, which is different from head of sales. Probably sales director will work under head of sales, and his KPIs are different from what the marketing director does. But now we know what is it that excites him, what is it that he looks after on a day-to-day basis, so we can actually pinpoint the right solutions to him when we are reaching out to them and addressing it in a very appropriate manner. Now the end user, the actual sales rep who will be using your product. So his priorities, if you look at it, it's to actually source more opportunities, increase output and quality, generate more pipeline, closing more business. So the product is built for this person. But the purchase decisions are actually done by the other stakeholders in the market as well. So if I have to categorize it, this is the end user, sales rep is a end user, sales director is a champion, and head of sales is a decision maker, right? So that's how we looked at it, and that makes it super easy for us to see that when we're talking, I mean, you might talk to sales rep, but he might not be the decision maker. So we know that, we need to tell him that, hey, can you connect us to your, the team that is leading this entire efforts? Like, we'd like to see what are the challenges we can solve with the product that we have, and the sales cycle will reduce drastically because we are talking to the right team. And again, when we talk to them, we know what we need to address to the user, right? So this is again a completely B2B use case, but it is a similar approach for a B2C use case as well, in terms of understanding your customers, and because you now know who your customers are, it makes it super easy for you to create your advertisements or create your communication that resonates with the end user that you're targeting to. And that's why it's essential that you need it.
Maybe we can do some Q&A, Nanda.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have probably a couple of more slides.
Sure. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just wind it up quickly, so that I'm actually touching upon the other important aspects also. Yeah, so now that we have arrived here, now it's essential that you start targeting. I mean, until now we looked at segmentation, but now you start also looking at evolving this as a communication. And that's where the overall targeting and positioning will come into picture, which also includes the 3 C's. I'm assuming you might have come across these model, 3 C's, which involves customers, competition, and company. But yeah, if you look at, I mean, this is a Facebook audience, which we use for running ads. But it's because we get into the details of understanding an ICP. Now we know who should we target in terms of different demographic geographics that we have selected. And at the same time, now that we know what other brands that will resonate with the type of audience that we have, it's also easy to select their interests so that we are actually reaching out to the right target market and reduce our ROIs, increase our ROIs, because now we know we are reaching the right market, and the conversion rates will be higher because they resonate with the type of product that you have. Again, this is for a mix of B2B, B2C use case for Facebook, but mostly B2C. Whereas LinkedIn, it's for the B2B use case where you get into the details of their designations, company, industry, and different other factors which will make it easier for you to target and reach out to the right market. Again, I've just listed down the target market for Coca-Cola because we looked at B2B, a quick glimpse of B2C. I mean, this is how they look at geographical, demographical, psychographic classes, and also some of the components of in the behavioral components as well. And a quick glimpse, Nike, I'm sure some of you love it for the way it's positioned and the kind of experience that you get out of it. But yeah, the overall packaging to the overall essence that you perceive from the brand, it all starts with understanding the users, and ultimately that leads to the end product which you see here. Yeah, that's all. That's what I had today, and happy to take up questions or in case if you feel that made sense, or any other thoughts, any do you think that this makes sense for ICP, the overall ICP that we are planning to build? Any open to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Nanda. That was a great session. So Yogi, we could maybe start with some of the questions. So one says that, how do I discover customer segments that I don't know yet?
Okay, sure. How do I discover customer segments that I don't know yet? Okay, is this for a B2B or B2C use case, or in general?
In general.
Okay. I think it starts with looking at primarily your existing customer, your best customer. I mean, if you look at Swiggy right now, I'll just give an example of a Swiggy because earlier they entered into food delivery. They started delivering. I mean, that's where they stand for. We know them for that. But right now, probably after Dunzo and other players got into this market, they also recently entered into launching a product called Instacart or Swiggy Genie. Like, now we use Swiggy for different components, right? Like now they understood the existing customers really well. So these are my customers who are basically working professionals or who don't want to step out, who want to save time by at the comfort of their home, they need to order. And they pioneered at food delivery. But at the same time, the pain point is same, right? Like you just don't need food at the convenience. You also need other things at your doorstep, right? It's groceries, and although grocers actually are leading in the market, but at the same time, Big Basket is actually also like they actually stood standing in the market. But because as a product, most of the customers are already aware about Swiggy. They know the pain point that they're addressing, and it makes it super easy for like a user to actually, they've already built that habit loop on addressing the pain point that they are solving for. So now it makes it super easy for Swiggy to look at another category, launching another category and targeting the same set of customers. Of course, not all customers that Swiggy were already servicing will be the right fit for it, but within those, because you now have a data of tons of customers who have purchased, who have used, like it could be the frequency, how frequently the customer is actually utilizing the product, right? Now I know that, okay, this person is probably ordering almost every day. So it makes a lot of sense for me to promote this product to this person to start with as a beta user, rather than actually promoting it to all the users, right? So it all starts with your top customer, like your existing user who have already ingrained with your product, and then you slowly evolve and expand that market, and at the same time create another market and among themselves. So probably there could be tons of customers who would be using Zomato, but because they started liking like Instacart offering, now they will also explore Swiggy, and probably slowly start like the frequency of usage in the Zomato will be a little lesser. So yeah, it's a mix and match, but at the same time, it's understanding your customer, the pain points, and like slowly evolving it from there.
So one more says, please elaborate more on the brand identity prism.
Sure. Okay. The reason why you need a brand identity, it's because I'll probably share my screen again. Okay. Yeah, we also got a question on internalization, on externalization. It's important that, when as a brand, like you're standing out in the market, to create the right positioning and the differentiation strategy. Otherwise, there are tons of other people like who are actually looking at different products, like MI and so many other players in the market. Like how would you be able to resonate, right? So if you look at some of the marketing collaterals, marketing distributions that is actually done by OnePlus, it's completely different than how MI would do a marketing. And the reason why it's required is like, okay, when Apple is doing its marketing communication, because they understood their users in terms of personality, in terms of the self-image they reflect, it's now easier for Apple to determine what theme, what tonality, and what type of components that they should reflect, so that they can actually target the users really well, right? One example probably that I can handpick is Apple's recent advertisements about privacy. So I think we all have been going through the different challenges with Facebook and Google, right? So what Apple did is a unique ad where I'm assuming some of you have already came across this, where they started showing that a person like actually using a smartphone at a different grocery store, because he's processing the payment, like the person starts to follow like wherever he goes physically, right? But essentially what they're portraying is like, because wherever you go, the actual brand or actual product is actually following you. But at the same time, they lead and showcase that you can actually stop your privacy. It's within your premises, which probably other brands are not letting you to do that. So Apple stands for privacy, and probably the next that I know is like Samsung in this category. So it's because the premium segment, the premium customers, like their choice of preference primarily is privacy. They decided that, okay, I need to, now there is a lot of conversations that's going on around privacy. I need to stand out and do a marketing campaign around privacy. And that's important because as a brand, there is a lot of noise, and that's how some of the amazing marketing campaigns are actually launched, so that you captivate the audience for one, you understand what's going on in the market, and second, now that you know, like, this is what you resonate with the users, it makes it super easy for you to again come up with the communications and start being in touch with the customers through different modes of communication. And internalization is basically how do you perceive some of these cues that you get out of the brand. Like, it's about, does it internalize with your values? Like, okay, it's versatile, it's youthful. Like, probably Apple is more tech geeky, right? Like Apple is more like sophisticated, and it's more premium, right? But whereas OnePlus, it's more youthful, right? Do you represent that youthness within yourself? And that's how probably, again, Apple is like used by, say, age group between like 18 to maybe like 40, and OnePlus like probably like 80 to 30 or 35, right? So it helps a long way in understanding like who we can target and who we can essentially look at as a market. And again, look internally, like, okay, as a person, does it resonate with me? And externalization is all about how do you relate that product with the outside market for the cause that you're solving, or for what you stand for, and some of the principles that you have that you showcase in the market. Does that make sense?
Sure. Thanks. One more question says, could you advise us on any tools for building ideal customer profile?
Any tools for building ideal customer profile? There are tons of tools out there. I have not personally used any of the tools because I mean, all that you need is understanding these different components that you need within the ideal customer profile. Let me get to that slide. Yeah, it is the top factors, accounts, this for B2B again, demographics, needs, pain points, behavior, solutions. There are definitely a lots of tools that are already out there where you have templates that lists down these factors. You can you can look at different behavioral and characteristics of people that is already listed. All you need to do is just start adding them to the buckets for the user that you have. But yeah, I have not personally used any tools as such, because it's there are different variations and versions. It's better that you look at your product and start evolving your ICP based on what product you have.
Sure. So kindly shed some light on the effect of colors in defining brands.
Sure. Okay. I think we also saw a use case where, yeah, this is a good slide. If you look at it, like excitement, probably we get into this excitement state. Almost most of the colors are like pretty much dark and also like vibrant. And I am not an expert in choosing the brand colors, but it's basically there is, if you go to the Google and like just type like brand colors, and it's emotional connect, like you will get tons of options for you to choose. But I think you can already see a pattern here to some extent in terms of like the first case, sincerity, where not just in terms of selecting the color, but at the same time having the logo and also having the fonts. Everything is boiling down into like what do you stand for as a personality, right? And there's also one more slide that we looked at. Yeah. So The free, I mean, I think this is not the actual colors representation, but I mean, you can probably search in Google for more of this, but uh, it all starts with like understanding and boiling down your personality, and
Just
then
to add on, one more question says, how important are the colors associated with your company logo to build it into an empire?
sure. Uh, when I actually worked at, I mean, smaller startups, it doesn't make a lot. I mean, it makes a lot of impact to at some extent. But large organizations, especially, in fact, one use case when I was working at Upgrade, right? I worked at Upgrade for twice. And first time when I joined, they've already decided all the brand components and everything. But the second time I joined, the brand was going through, the company was going through a overall brand overall. And they started looking at making the changes for the Upgrade logos. So, for example, the first logo was a mix of, yeah, this was the first logo that you see over here. And here's the second logo that we have right now over here. So right now, almost all the communications and the events that we do, it is all resonated with this specific logo. And you should also probably look at brand guidelines. So brand guidelines essentially talks about, there are a few brand guidelines that you can actually get it in the web, which outlines why they have selected, say, red as a theme, or the other set of components that they have chosen, like, along with bread. So it's at a bread, it's straight, it's red and white, that's it, right? And secondly, they've also chosen, like, when you're communicating about an event, or when you're communicating anything that's related to Upgrade courses, like, you always use this specific format. And there are different textures in which you can use. You can't cross the limit, and brand team, like, comes back to us even if you make a slightest of the mistake, telling us that, you can't use this way, because uh, it just increases, one, creating the brand equity, and second, to create the brand recall, which is important, because as a user, we go through tons of other products, but whenever we look at McDonald's as a logo, we always, it just catches our attention, because we associate with it. And secondly, uh, probably, like, McDonald's logo has not been changed for a long time, but brands do actually go through a process of considering whether it makes sense for the type of audience we have, and slowly start reiterating it again and again. But if I have to put it down, it mainly helps in brand recall and brand equity, uh, and the identity also.
Great. So, also, how do I discover customer segments for startups where market is new and there are no existing customers? Your thoughts on it?
Sure. So, uh, ideally, there should be a customer, or it is, we call this as a growing market, because when you're launching a specific product, uh, first, you're launching a product because you're solving a specific problem that is already there in the market. And if you're probably picking a product that doesn't have a specific target market, and it doesn't make sense, right? So it's important that first and foremost you understand what is the current market that you have, and whether it is a growing market. If it is not a growing market, I'd recommend probably, like, not to look at it. I mean, when you're considering to launch a product and go ahead with it, but uh, it's important that you understand what is the current market size. And so we call this TAM, target addressable market, where we start looking at what is the target addressable market that I have currently. And then we also look at the growth, how it is growing on a year on year, or probably for the next 5 years, 10 years, so that I have a market opportunity. And so, yeah, I think if there is no customer, I think that's what I'd recommend. Uh, or probably I'd say, uh, if you take any startups, right, like, they go through a lot of pivots. Not all startups, but most of the startups, to arrive at the product market fit. It takes like 3 years or 5 years, even 10 years, to arrive at the product market fit, because ideally they start with something, and they figure out that this is not for the kind of market, for the kind of product that I have. I don't have a large market, and they start to pivot. But because they go through those failures, right, over like 3-4 years, they go through, okay, selling the product, they get to talk to a lot of customers, they know that, okay, this is not what is helping. And then they start pivoting it towards probably launching a new product or launching another category of product within the industry that they serve.
Okay, that's great. So one more question someone asked was Paytm launched candy named Paytm Sweet Change. What was the need for it? Any thoughts?
Sorry, I don't know the product. Or can you say it again?
I mean, it says Paytm Sweet Change, but anyway, I think let that pass, little irrelevant. So we've done with Prism. So what would be the right time to think about ICP? About ICP? Should I keep it ready before I build the product or after MVP?
I'd say before the MVP, before even launching the product, because in fact at Foxbound I was present even before the launch of the product, and ICP was our Bible. When we were looking at building some of the product components. Say for example, I'm taking B2B. I mean this because I've worked in the product. I've worked with the engineering team to a large extent. We have as an end user, you're building a product. Say for a sales rep, you know what are the day-to-day activities look like. So you know that they need to build pipeline, they need to add leads, and we focus on that, right? But as a decision maker, who's like a sales head, for them it's reporting. For them, they don't need to worry about, they don't want to think more about how do I ads and all of that, right? So we have to, as and when we started evolving, we had to actually evolve the product to make reporting more easier, to make collaboration more easier. So we started introducing fact features where, okay, sales rep can actually transfer the leads among other sales reps, and these things can be monitored by the decision maker, a sales head, at a more overarching level where he knows that, okay, how many leads are being transferred to, how many leads are being collaboratively worked by sales reps, right? So now that we know ICP for each of these users, so we know that, okay, what feature we need to build for a specific user within the product. And that's why it's important that you first have an ICP and then start working towards MVP or launching a product.
That's great. On that note, over to you, Yogeswaran, for your comments, and I would let our any comments, Yogeswaran? Or
yeah, please share your thoughts on the question. I mean, chat. How was the session? Any feedback?
And, on that note, I would our CEO, Mr. Y.S. Narayan, for his comments. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Karthik. So that was very interesting to hear you talk a lot about a subject which is very, very close to my heart. It's something which I've been practicing, and I still believe I'm a learner after 35 years of doing that. So to the participants, what I would just like to say is very simple. If you look at a subject like a topic like branding and how do you go about building a brand, believe me, guys, it is something what Nanda Kumar was talking about here is trying to cover in 45 minutes is something which takes a minimum of 10 to 15 years for someone to really understand and practice and gain experience and know what works and what doesn't. And there are no one shoe fits all kind of policy out here, right? And especially given the fact that all of you here, participants, are aspiring entrepreneurs, most of you, correct me if I'm wrong, your core area of strengths, core area of competencies is more in a technical side. And for you to understand a much more complex topic like hardcore branding we don't expect you to get a complete grasp over it, but definitely Nanda made a great effort. And I think he really brought out some very, very interesting points in terms of trying to talk about how, at the end of the day, any kind of communication, whether it is advertising, branding, or communications, is all about the science and the art. The science part of it is in understanding your audience, understanding whom you're talking to, understanding what you want them to do specifically, and then look at what kind of challenges or barriers you're going to face in achieving your objectives, and how do you break down those barriers through compelling arguments that you can give, right? So that's typically how you build any kind of communication plan. And brand strategy, when it comes to that, is a much, much more vast and a very, very deep field. So where companies invest millions and millions of dollars to try to get the most complex part of their marketing mix right, which is understanding your audience. So you've got large organizations who've gone ahead. You've got example like something like Google. You have seen where, for example, at Google Plus or Google Hangouts, a company like Google with a marketing muscle, with a fantastic understanding of the target audience, etc. In spite of everything that they did, they were not able to be successful in those products, right? And why were they not able to do that? Because in spite of whatever that they did, at the end of the day, the consumer has got a mind of his own, his or her own. So that makes the whole concept of branding extremely interesting, very fascinating, and very challenging for marketeers. And especially for you aspiring entrepreneurs, this is one area where I know personally that this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we'll be more than happy to try to give you more inputs in terms of how you could get a better grasp of the complex science and the art of branding and communications. But in all, I think Nanda did a great job with 45 minutes trying to cover what we are still learning, as I said earlier, after 30 years. So thank you, Nanda, for your time and effort. I think it was a fantastic session. Greatly appreciated.